In this recorded tutorial, we're going to look at the basic 2D drawing tools and the status bar icons. So following on from the last tutorial, you should be able to start up a new drawing and you should be in the 2D drafting and annotation workspace. This can be selected up here, and if you can't see this bar, you need to switch it on by clicking on the workspace icon here, or down at the bottom you can also select the workspace from here. Now before we get going, you may realise that I've got a white background for my model space, and on the Lipper computers you've got a black background by default. This is purely personal preference. My reason for drawing on a white background is that most of the drawings I do, especially for my freelance work, is going to be printed out onto paper. And so I like to have a white background, as I know that all the colours that I choose are going to show up. For example, if I had a black background, I could choose to draw yellow lines and they would really show up on my screen. But when I come to print out my plans, yellow lines do not show up at all really, they just look really faint. And so I like to have a white background because then I get a true representation of what I'm going to get when I print out. Conversely, other people like to use a black background, especially if they're using it for hours and hours, because the white can be quite glaring on the screen. It doesn't really matter which colour you choose, but I'll show you how to change that now. If we go up to the red application button and go all the way down the menu to options, we get a dialog box. And in this dialog box we've got many tabs along the top, and we want to be on the second one in, which says display. Down the first column to colours, and the background is actually selected. It's the 2D model space uniform background, and you can see that mine's set to white and yours is probably set to black. So if you want to change it, that's where you change it, and then you click apply and close, click OK, and the new colour will be set. So now I'd like to introduce you to the status bar icon, and that is this set of icons down here. This is where we can switch on and off the settings for the drawing guides that we have. If they're blue, they're on, otherwise they're switched off. And the visibility of these buttons is set in this end menu that says customization. It's this 3-line, I think it's called a burger menu. If we click on there, you can see we get a pop-up menu and we can tick on and off all of the buttons' visibility. So if it's ticked, we can see the button, and if it's unticked, it's invisible. So the first thing I'd like you to do is make sure that your menu looks like this. If you look on the handout that's available below this video, then you'll find that on page 9 there is a printout of this. Okay, and once you've done that, you can then close the menu, and we're going to switch off all of these icons and switch them on one at a time and see what they do. So we're going to switch off the grid, and the grid snap is already off. We're going to switch off this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. We can leave these two. We're going to look at those at a later time. The first tool we're going to try is the line tool. So I'm just going to come up to the maximize button and just maximize my window. And there are 3 ways of starting most tools. So the first way of starting the line tool is to click on the icon, left click, and that will start drawing a series of lines, and it will continue going until you stop. And one of the ways of stopping is to right click and go to enter. A quicker way of starting the line tool is to type in LINE, press enter, and you can see at the bottom it says line, specify first point, and AutoCAD will prompt you all the way through what it's expecting you to do when you're using any tool, which is really nice. Okay, so that's now starting the line tool, and a quicker way of finishing drawing a line is to just press the spacebar or enter key. The third way of drawing a line is to just type L enter, which is even quicker. So if you're a fan of keyboard shortcuts like me, then you're going to probably want to try and remember some of these, because it saves you having to come up to the ribbon menu every time you want to use a tool. Okay, so I can press spacebar to finish, and actually spacebar will actually allow me to start the last tool that I used. So I can use spacebar to start and spacebar to finish. Spacebar to start, spacebar to finish. There's also under the right click a repeat line, and that will repeat any of the last command that you did. But I find spacebar is just a lot easier. To get out of any function that we're doing on AutoCAD, you can press escape, and you'll find that you'll probably be mashing that escape key quite a lot to begin with, because that will get you out of any command. To delete a line, we can either select it by clicking on it, and you'll see that it goes blue, and press delete. We can also select it and go right click and go to erase. And every time you click on a line, it adds it to the selection. To remove a line from the selection, press and hold shift and click on it, and it will remove it. Another way of selecting is to press and drag across, and you get a blue solid square, and anything that's contained within that square will be selected. And you can see that's a really useful way of selecting just certain objects, because they have to be completely contained within that selection mark. And then we can press delete. If we click and drag right to left, you can see that now we get a green square with a dotted line, and anything that's touching that green square will be selected. So that's a way of selecting more objects very quickly. So we can just go along, select everything, and press delete. Now I'm just going to draw some lines again and show you that if you find that when you're trying to select objects that you get this Lasso Tool, it's called, that allows you to draw around just specific objects in order to select them, then what you're doing is you're pressing down and holding on the left mouse button. Now you can switch this feature off, and you go to the red A, options, and this time you want to be in the selection tab and go down to this allow press and drag for lasso tick box and uncheck it. And now it won't happen. So my canvas is pretty full now, but this is an infinite space. So if I want to actually move my drawing around and zoom and pan, I can zoom using the middle mouse wheel, and I can pan by pressing and holding down the middle mouse wheel and dragging, and I can find a bit of empty space. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start the line tool and show you that you can actually do a right click and go to close, and what that will do is it will draw the last line connecting to the first line. So we've now got a closed loop. But these are still just individual lines, and you can see if I hover over these lines, they go bold, and they're just individual lines that just happen to be connected together. So far we've drawn lines, but we've not actually drawn a line to a specific measurement, and in AutoCAD you're pretty much always going to want to know what length the line is. So I'm going to show you how we do this. We click on the line tool and start our line by doing a first left click. We pick the direction we want the line to be in, and we can now type in, and it will appear on the bottom in the command line, the distance. So I'm going to type in 1000 and press enter, and you can see I've now got a line that is going to be 1000 millimeters long. Now AutoCAD doesn't know that it's millimeters, it doesn't care what the units are, it just knows that it's 1000 something, 1000 units. And in my head it's in millimeters, because everything we draw in our industry should be in millimeters. And we draw everything in a scale of 1 to 1. So if it's 1000 millimeters in reality, then we draw it 1000 millimeters on our screen. And to finish this line, we can just press the spacebar key. Now that particular line is not exactly horizontal, so what we could do with is some kind of guide or ruler to be able to help us to draw straight, and that's where this first icon comes in. It's this one here, and it's called polar tracking. So I'm going to switch that on, and I'm going to show you just to the side of that icon there's a little white down arrow, and if we click on there you can see we've got some numbers, some settings, and those settings are angles. So at the moment I'm ticked against 90, 180, 270 and 360. Okay, so that's good. And now I'm going to come up and draw a line, and you'll see that when I do my first click, what I get is a guide to show me where horizontal is. And you can see next to the cursor it says polar, and it tells me the length of that line that I've drawn, and then it says 0 degrees. So I know that that is straight, and I get this green dotted line that I can follow. Now, AutoCAD uses the rules of mathematics to work out angles, and so 0 degrees is at 3 o'clock going round anti-clockwise. So if I go round anti-clockwise, you can see the next point that it's going to snap to is 90 degrees, 180, 270 and so forth. Now if I come back down to the settings and change this to 45, 90, 135, 180, you'll now see the little snap to angles of 45. There it is. You may have noticed, this is the nice thing about AutoCAD compared to other pieces of software, I didn't actually stop drawing a line in order to change this setting. So don't be tempted to think that you have to come out of the line command in order to change any of these icons. I can change it in the middle of actually drawing a vector. So I'm going to leave that at 145, and that will allow me to draw any angle of 145 around the 360 compass. And it will just help me to be able to get those exactly where I want them. Okay, the next thing I'm going to show you is in this pop-up menu there's a tracking settings, and that allows me, if I click on there, to add additional angles. I can tick the checkbox, click new and put in, I don't know, 15. Press enter, press OK, and now when I draw a line it will also snap to 15 degrees. So it's like having a ruler and a set square and a protractor all built into one tool. Now I'm just going to press undo, which is Control Z. That's a really handy shortcut to know. Control Z is undo, Control Y is redo. You can also use the undo and redo buttons at the top in the quick tools menu. Once you've drawn a line, you can actually modify it, and it's quite easy by using these blue square nodes at the ends of the lines. If we click on one of those, they go red, and now that allows me to change the position, the length and the direction of this line. We can also select all of the lines and do them all at the same time. So by pressing down the Shift key and holding it, clicking on the ends of those lines, they go red, and now let go of Shift and you can move all of them at the same time. It's a really useful feature, and I really wish Microsoft Word did this. Okay, so the next status bar icon that we're going to look at is this one here, which is the Ortho Mode. Now you'll see that when I switch this one on, it switches off polar tracking. And what this tool does is it constrains you to only being able to draw in right angles. It's very useful when you want to move an object and keep it straight. So we're going to switch back on the polar tracking, and the next one we're going to look at is this one here, which is called Object Snap, and it's the square with the green dot in the top left hand corner. This time when we draw a line, it looks the same, but if we hover over any other line we start to get endpoints showing up with a green square, and that means that I can lock snapping exactly to that endpoint every time. This icon also has a pop-up menu, and you can see that we have many options for snap points. So endpoint and midpoint are ticked, and they're the most useful. All the other settings are useful for particular tasks. So make sure you've got endpoint and midpoint switched on, and you'll see that when I go to the centre of a line, I this time get a green triangle, and that means that I know that I'm drawing exactly in the centre of that line. Sometimes what you'll find is that these snap points get in the way slightly. So for example, if I wanted to draw this line to just off the end of the line, you can see that it won't let me. It's automatically, because I'm somewhere near, snapping to the end of that line and showing me a green square. That means that if I click, it won't draw it where my cursor is. It's going to snap to that end. Now that's not what I wanted, so I'm just going to undo that, and I'm just going to show you a quick way of temporarily isolating down to just one snap point, or switching it off completely. What we do is we hold down the control key and do a right click, and you can see we get this temporary menu system that allows me to either just select midpoints or endpoints, or at this point I'm just going to go to none, and now it's not going to snap to anything. Click none, and it allows me to go very near that endpoint, but it's going to put it exactly where my cursor is. And now, because it was temporary, it's back on to endpoints just as before. Next to the object snap icon, there is a button for object snap tracking. With this on, we get additional snap points when we're drawing. So for example, if I was to pick up the line tool and draw a square, let's say 1000, enter, down 1000, making sure that it snaps straight down. Now at this point, instead of having to type in 1000 here, I can actually hover over this line that's already drawn at 1000 and then pull down, making sure that I get this green dotted line and the X, the black X on the cursor. That means that it's now object snap tracked to that point, and when I pull down, when those two snap to straight like this, I can click, and now I know that new line is 1000 millimeters long as well. This really speeds up our workflow. So you're pretty much always going to have on the object snap tracking button. Another useful feature of this is if I wanted to draw a line, let's say 500 millimeters away from this point, with object snap tracking on, I can just hover. I haven't clicked yet, just hover, let it pick up and put a green square, pull across, making sure again that I get this black cross through my cursor and a green dotted line, pull across any way that you want it to draw, type in the amount, 500, press enter, and it is now drawing a line 500 millimeters away from that point. The last status bar menu item that I want to look at is this one here. It's called Dynamic Input. So far you can see that if we pick up a line tool and we draw the lines, whenever we type in a value it types it down at the bottom in the command line. With Dynamic Input on, we get all that information around the cursor. Now you can see as I draw I get information to show me exactly how long that line is, and when I type in 1000 it types it up and everything is displayed near the cursor. You can also see that over here it shows the angle as well. So if I wanted to draw this line at, let's say, 25 degrees, I could come over here and find 25 degrees just there. Or I can press the tab key and tab over and type in the angle. So pressing tab will switch between those two boxes. So I could, now I'm locked at 25 degrees, I could type in 2000 and it'll draw a line exactly 2 meters long. In the next recorded tutorial we'll look at the circle, polyline, arc, rectangle and polygon tools.